It really is very good to be here and to see many faces that I know and to see many that I don't know. And I am really just so delighted to share with you on this very special day. And I was, from the time the committee invited me to come, I was jotting down memories and various events that I wanted to cover. And there were, as many of you who know me can imagine, there were lots of them already written on sheets of paper. And finally, this last week, I'm thinking, okay, where do I begin to sort and cut and all of that? And for some reason, I had this sense in asking that question. I had this sense that I do believe came ultimately from God. Remember the Seder. And I thought, what? Yeah, I can remember some Seder meals that we had. Remember the question. And you who have been through a Seder know that the question of the evening is, what makes this night special from all other or different than all other nights? So I began to play with that. What makes this anniversary, this event, different than all other events? And when I put it in that perspective, then I began to realize that this day is really not about remembering those good old days. This day, like in the Seder, is about asking God to be so actively present with us that the question is, what's next, Lord? Where do we go from here? Because it's the reality of living in that question that allows God to inform us about what's next. It's not about what's gone before, except as a foundation. It's about what God is doing now, so that the foundation will be increased for the future. And so I began to think about that and think that, okay, it's the youngest person at the Seder meal that asks the question, what makes this night different? So I recall when the two congregations began to try and wrestle with the vision of coming together and moving to a new location, that it wasn't about the survival of those two congregations. It was about how those congregations could thrive into the next year, the next century, and beyond. So, I'd like to ask all of you who are a part of this congregation that were not a part of either of the congregations 10 years ago, in 2010, 4 years ago. All of you who are now a part of this congregation to please stand where you are. It was for you that vision was undertaken. Thank you. So you're the one who's asking the question. It really was for you that it seemed God was saying to the two congregations, you need to be an active presence in a community that will draw others to the experience of God through this community. And so I began to think about this anniversary in terms of the events that have gone before, in light of all of you who are new and the ones who are yet to be known. Now, what do we do then in 2014 as a congregation? Or 2024? Or 2054? Or 2284? Yeah, 2284. Now imagine that, if you will. And do you know the reason that I'm asking you to imagine that? Is because that's 270 years from this date. And do you know why that's important? It's because the celebration today is built on 270 years of ministry. Hear that, folks, 270 years. And you say, well, we're not that old, not as a common congregation. But there is 154 years of ministry known as Independent Protestant Church, Central Community Church, Scottwood Congregational Church. 99 years known as Eastside Church of Christ, Wilson Avenue Christian Church, Southeast Christian Church, and actually 17 years known as Gender Road Christian Church, 15 of which have been in this place. Think of the history that you have. Think of the people on whose shoulders you stand. Think of the difference that it has made, not only in your lives, but in the community. And in fact, in the region. And in fact, in the world. So, the followers of Christ have always been a pilgrim people. That was certainly the sense when you as a congregation moved into interim space on Channing Way. It was true when you moved in here on June 20th, 1999, and weren't even allowed in the building. Some of you remember that. Had to meet under the portico because we did not have the permission to hold services in the building. A pilgrim people. And for a while, that was until the outdoor drive-in service began, each year there was an annual return to the portico to have an outdoor service that reminded us that we are a pilgrim people. We are people on the move with a variety of names, a variety of locations. And the earliest beginning of that was in 1843, when a group of Christians met in a downtown hotel to say, we want to be a living presence of God in this community, and without the encumbrance of some hierarchy telling us at the congregational level what to do. And so Independent Protestant Church was created. And another wing of that pilgrimage took place in the mid-1890s when a group of members from Broad Street Christian Church who lived in the near east side of Columbus would get up Sunday after Sunday and go off to worship at their congregation, leaving behind them a whole group of neighborhood children who were playing in the yards, in the streets of that neighborhood. And some of them began to wonder, what's God asking us to do with them, for them, because of our faith? And so the Chamberlain family invited the children to come into their yard and on their front porch. And the other 6 or 8 people who shared that question offered to also offer leadership. And so a Christian education program was born. But to their surprise, the parents began to accompany the children into the Chamberlain's yard and onto the porch. And they said, well, what are we going to do with them? That's not what we thought. So we're going to have to organize some kind of educational experience for them. And by the fall, they said, we're going to have to organize some sort of worship experience for them. And Eastside Church of Christ was born. The year, 1898. And from that beginning, Each congregation sharing in its own vision of who they needed to be, moved forward, not reliving that beginning, but living in the moment, asking and receiving the answer about what's next for the people of God. And when Independent Protestant, then Central Community, felt the need to move to a new location, they moved into an architectural winning structure on the corner of Barnett and Scottwood. And when I-70 took the community and divided it into two, right there in the Near East Side, the people of Wilson Avenue Church said, we have to move to another location. And they moved east as well, Barnett and Livingston. And looking around, the two congregations, now relocated, said, what can we do together that we couldn't do separately? And they began to jointly sponsor Vacation Bible School and the food pantry and joint services on special days like Ash Wednesday, Good Friday, Pentecost, etc. And the two shared a camaraderie that eventually led to the sharing of the dream to relocate to another spot, not so heavily saturated with churches, where ministry for all people could take place. And that all people was extremely important. Because within the first couple of years of its history, Independent Protestant Church took a vote saying that no person, regardless of gender, of race, of national language, will be denied membership or leadership position in this congregation. That, my friends, was before the Civil War. What a heritage! This is something that, in fact, instills in this congregation a sense to look beyond, to reach out, to recognize in the influx of new people come a dynamic that, in fact, alters everything. It allows the Spirit of God to be alive and well and to shake some of us to our core, because it asks us to be about the will of God and not about our own short-sightedness. And so, it's not surprising that this congregation has at its very foundation a sense of mission. A mission to those immediately around, and a mission even to the ends of the earth. It's not surprising that at least two people from this congregation have gone into foreign missionary service. Veer Carpenter to Puerto Rico, where he served for 40-some years. Did you know him, Sharita? But in his legacy, that awareness of the world beyond has been so critically important. Rhonda Almond left her position as associate pastor here in the 80s and went to Korea to serve as a missionary. And the Southeast congregation welcomed back John and Kay White, who had been missionaries in the Philippines. A global view. That's your heritage. A global view. It's not about just what is on the same street or down the street. It's about God's world. That's your view. That's what we celebrate today. It's about a ministry that began in education and continues now to challenge you as a congregation about how to educate people from cradle to grave. Yes, that beginning ministry and education over on Wilson Avenue was significant for the children. But in the early 1900s, Independent Protestant Church founded the Pauline Home. That's still going today on East Main Street for older, retired women. That's a legacy. And it's your legacy. And it's asking you the question, so what do we do with that legacy? It was a part of the question that brought us to this location. Saying, yes, we want an educational wing, we want a gymnasium, and we want land enough that maybe there will be a retirement home on the rear of this property. And God's saying to you, so what makes this celebration different? It's about lifting up before us the possibility of where God's leading you next. Originally, Independent Protestant Church in downtown Columbus offered services in English and German. I am so tickled, so pleased, so thankful. This congregation is offering services in English and Spanish. It's a part of your DNA. It's a part of your legacy. It's not some whimsical idea. It's a part of who you are and what God is asking of you now. Asking, leading, challenging, and saying to you just what Fred Blakesley said about the dynamics of this congregation. Yes, it was true then, and it's true now. And a part of it is true because God isn't willing to let you just sit on your laurels and say, wasn't that a wonderful time? God is saying to you, make this a wonderful time with my Spirit at the helm. And what you're going to be asked to do next, some of it won't be easy. Some of it won't be to the liking of some of you. Some of it won't be easy to convince others to join you. We had that same kind of thing happen again and again when we were told it'll never work to put two denominations together. You'll never get a majority of the people in either congregation to follow you 15 miles from or 15 minutes from the previous locations. But do you know the reason that nobody paid serious attention to those questions? Because the direction obviously came from the living God. And who are we to defy the living God's direction? There are those who, along the way, have said, well, this may be well and good for the moment, but it can't be sustained. Well, my friends, it's been sustained for 15 years, and the dynamics of this congregation are alive and well. Because you're not willing to simply settle for what someone said won't work. The living God has said to you, this is your task. This is your direction. And time again, as it happened to me, to Kay, I imagine to you, John, there have been people who have come into these doors that said, I've passed this location many, many times. And I just sense that there's some kind of energy emanating from here. There's some invitation that has been exerted on me without an individual person doing it. What's that about? Well, only thing I know is that about the Spirit of God emanating from the people of God. You are those people. You are those vessels through whom God chooses to reach out. And what the next step is, God only knows. And that's the way it should be. Is it going to be further exploration of special needs ministry? Or how about artistic expression and faith? Or maybe about youth and children's ministry, Hispanic ministries, senior adult ministries, family ministries, about the worship life, about media ministry, about ministry through the region and the general manifestation. Is it about the kitchen ministry, sports ministry, all of which have its roots, remember, not in 15 years, but in years and years, 270 to be exact, of ministry done for Christ within your own expression, your own faith. Maybe it's men's and women's ministry. Maybe the Academy of Religious Studies. Maybe it's an ecumenical ministry or prayer ministry. Regardless of what you do, make sure your prayer life is intact. That has guided this congregation for centuries. It's guided them at a time when they did not know what to do. The story is told of Howard Henry, who is Peg Painish's brother, by the way. At the time when Scott Wood had been, or the negotiations between Scott Wood and another congregation to unite had somewhat fallen apart, they weren't sure where to go next. And Howard, as a respected member of the congregation, proposed to the worshipers that every Sunday evening, beginning at 6 p.m., they would all be in prayer in their own homes about what to do next. And what emerged from that time of prayer was a direction of the board to John Bell to approach Southeast and ask, what are the chances of our joining the vision for a new congregation in Canal Winchester? You see, God does work through prayer. God is working through prayer. And you are the participants in that, the witnesses to what God can do when others say it won't work, it's impossible. Friends, don't let those words cross your lips, because God has a plan for you that's built on how many years? A lot of years, and a lot of people, and a lot of ministry. Go with the blessing of God to discover the next opportunities. God bless you.